group conversation that I was part of near the start of the year, we ended up discussing whether people are essentially good or evil. Some were convinced that people are essentially evil, while others were convinced that the opposite is true. Perhaps this tension comes from the fact that people are capable of both. We can all think of people that we would put in the good bracket and others that we would consider evil. Yet if we take an honest look at ourselves, we'll admit that we're capable of both good and evil. For example, we have all been kind and unkind to others, just like we have all experienced kindness and unkindness from others. I believe the Bible has a way of holding things in tension. I believe it makes more sense of the world than any other explanation. I also believe that it offers more hope in the end. It tells us, on the one hand, that we're all made in the image of God. Or as one person put it in that group conversation that I was a part of, we all have the divine spark within. Therefore, we're all capable of good. After creating man and woman and everything else, it says in Genesis 1:31 that God saw all that he had made and it was very good indeed. So clearly God made people good, and for this reason we're capable of good. People are undoubtedly capable of kindness, love, empathy, compassion, generosity, justice, and other expressions of goodness. We have all seen that and experienced that in people. Yet, on the other hand, we all know people who are also capable of evil. We lock our cars and our businesses and our homes at night because we all know that this is true. We have justice systems in prison to try and deal with the problem of evil. On top of this, we see racial and political tension in our world, as well as exploitation and injustice. People are undoubtedly capable of unkindness, hate, cruelty, apathy, selfishness, and other expressions of evil. So the tension still remains. What about closer to home? Would you define yourself as good or evil? No matter where you land, I'm sure you'll at least admit that you're capable of both. Most of us like to think of ourselves as good because we can list some good things that we've done. Yet at the same time, we have to admit that we know only too well what it is to be mean or selfish, to envy or lie, to ignore need or resent someone. And aren't these the very things that cause the bigger problems in the world, like racism and injustice, for example? Prejudice, of which racism is one kind, starts when we resent someone for some reason. Do you resent anyone today? Injustice begins when we turn a blind eye to someone in need or someone being mistreated. We just don't want to get involved. We just don't want to see it. What is it that causes this tension between good and evil in us and in the world? As well as telling us that God made us good, the opening chapters of Genesis also poetically tell us it was when people doubted God's goodness that we lost our ability to be essentially good. It's when we believed the lie of the evil serpent who symbolized Satan in the story that evil first entered the world. So we are capable of good because we're made in the image of God. But sadly, we're also capable of evil because we believe the lies of the evil one. And I think this tension makes sense of the reality of our lives and experience. This is the tension of every human life. God made us good, but because we doubted and continue to doubt His goodness, our hearts lean towards evil. This is why Jesus said, "No one is good but God." One word that the Bible uses to explain all this is sin. Now, almost no one resists the divine spark side of the tension that God made us good. However, once the sinner side gets mentioned, resistance often arises. People back off. However, what if it is the sinner in us that is stopping the divine spark from becoming a full flame? Think of the things in yourself that you'd love to change. Bad traits and habits that hold you back or that negatively affect your relationships with others. Aren't they the things that stop you becoming a better and healthier version of you? Or as Jesus put it in Mark 7:20-23, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of people's hearts, come evil thoughts, sexual immoralities, thefts, murders, adulteries, greed, evil actions, deceit, self-indulgence, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. It's a long list. All these evil things come from within a person and defile a person. It's things like these that stop the divine spark from becoming a full flame. In Jesus' mind, sin is like a sickness that needs forgiven and healed. A virus that has infected the whole human race. A virus that infects even our good deeds with mixed motives so that we can even be guilty of doing the right things for the wrong reasons. In Matthew 9:12 and 13, Jesus said, "Those who are well have no need of a doctor, but only those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I came to call not the righteous, but sinners." In fact, mercy to sinners is the theme of the whole of Matthew chapter 9 up until this point. Jesus says to the paralytic at the beginning of the chapter, "Your sins are forgiven," highlighting that he had a deeper healing that was needed than his physical healing. In the same story, Jesus even asked the scribes, those who were considered to be the best of people of the day, he said, "Why do you think evil in your hearts?" Highlighting that these do-gooders still had evil in their hearts. Jesus then calls Matthew, who was a great sinner in the context of the culture, to follow him. After which Jesus shares a table with many tax collectors and sinners. And it's off the back of this that Jesus says what he says. It is not those who are well who need a doctor, but those who are sick. For I didn't come to call the righteous, but sinners. And righteous and sinners are just other ways of describing good and evil. So Jesus is the one with authority to forgive sins. Jesus is the one who calls and welcomes sinners, and Jesus is ultimately the one who heals the virus of sins, the virus of sin in all who respond to his call. As Isaiah 53 verse 5 foretold it, we are healed by his wounds. Jesus came and died and rose again to heal a world infected with evil by healing people who are infected with sin. Yet he doesn't make the vaccine mandatory. Instead, he makes it freely available for all who trust in his wounds to forgive them and heal them from their sin. But in order to trust him, we have to see and admit our need for healing. To do so, you're going to have to admit that maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. But that's the point when true healing begins. And that's the point where transformation and freedom begins.